We should be recording.
Okay, so let's get
Wait.
started.
Does anybody see the recording happening? Can
The
people get?
meeting is being recorded. That's a message I'm seeing on top of the Zoom presentation.
Okay.
Okay. Hello, everybody. So good evening. My name is Purnima, and I partner with Ron, Gopal, Mary, and Rob. So welcome everyone to the Enterprise Agile Global Community Meetup. I'm very much excited to share few things about our community. So we are a group of dedicated, experienced Agilists in our group, and along with Agilists, we have passionate business and technical leaders. We often collaborate to talk about different things about Agile, and we share knowledge about how we can implement those Agile practices within the enterprise. Since 2014, we have provided access to experts and their information for enterprise agile transformation and adoption. So, our community has widely helped many participants to gain real world experiences and also their knowledges, and they willingly take their knowledges back to their organization. At each meetup, we ensure a new rich topic highlighting the hottest trend has been explained. For today, we have our enthusiastic person, Ron. So he will be presenting on the topic entitled Manager, the Key to Empowering and Encouraging Self-Organizing Teams. You wanted to know more about Ron? So Rob will be providing more details about Ron, and he is with our community for a long time. So thank you, Ron and Rob. It's all yours now.
Yes, welcome everyone too. Ron Lichty is our speaker and co-organizer tonight, and I have met and known him for many years through his participation in the San Francisco Bay Area communities. So I'm very privileged to have him here today. Ron has been developing software for more than 35 years as a product creator, manager, and executive for companies that include Apple Computer, Stanford, Charles Schwab, Fujitsu, Razorfish, Berkeley Systems, and a score of startups. He currently writes and consults as a fractional VP engineering FireJumper. He trains managers in managing software people and teams, trains teams and executives in Agile, coaches, engineering leaders, and advises business, product, and engineering leaders on untangling the knots in software development, transforming chaos to clarity, and making product development hum. In one company after another, he's been untangling its software development knots and transforming chaos into clarity for the last 25 years in the era of Agile. His fifth book, co-authored with Mickey Mantle, not to be confused with the ball player, titled Managing the Unmanageable: Rules, Tools, and Insights for Managing Software, People, and Teams. Published by Addison Wesley, it's also turned into a video training for those companies as well as for O'Reilly, titling it Live Sessions, Managing Software, People, and Teams. Handing over to Ron.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Purnima. And welcome all of you. So today we're gonna talk about that exact topic that Rob mentioned, enlightened managers. And so I want to. So here's our agenda for the evening. We're going to talk about teams. Before we even do additional introductions of you, and then we're going to talk about self-organizing teams and best teams and managers and the role of managers in nurturing best teams. So I want to start with a chat storm. And some of you may have never done a chat storm. So let me explain what a chat storm is. So in a chat storm, I'm going to give you a question. We're going to do a couple of these tonight. So I'm going to explain the sort of concept and then give you the question. So I give you a question, you type your answer into chat, but you don't press enter until I give you the signal. Thus, we get a whole storm of chat responses all at the same time. So the question is, what characterized the best team you've ever been on? So let me give you a minute to type your answer into the chat, but don't press return, don't press enter, don't even try to press shift enter to do multiple lines because it'll kick the first one into chat. Zoom does not work like everything else.
I don't listen to instructions properly, Ron.
Oh, sigh.
I hit enter. That's like muscle memory. So I'm ready. Yeah.
All right, so the rest of you don't press enter and don't look at what Gopal and Melissa already put into the chat as you're putting yours into the chat. So what characterized the best team you've ever been on? And I'll give you 30 more seconds. All right, so as you finish, press return or enter. And so we see best collaboration, high level of motivation and energy, a culture of accountability and emotional safety, supportive and openly communicate, ownership plus intense focus on the end customer. I like all those. Collaboration, autonomy, respect, responsibility, trust, and knowledge. So, Tony, I want to point out that two of those words you put in there are two that I always, every single time I do this, and I've done this dozens of times, this exercise, I get trust and respect. Always. So good job. Thank you for giving them to me tonight. Tammy says, I felt capable and appreciated. There was a high level, there's that word trust again. Thank you, Larry. With the various members all having each other's backs. That having each other's backs is one I hear too. Best collaboration and high level of motivation and energy, empowered. Those are wonderful. So let me give you a little bit more introduction to me. So, but first, I want a little bit of introduction of you. So, who are you? So, type into chat a word or two, and give me a minute to. Oh, and I can't type. A word or two that describes who you are. The role, and so it doesn't have to be the role you're currently in, but the role that you were in, or the role that you hope to be in, but whatever role that brings you here tonight would be the role to type into chat, and type that in and just press return. So I want to see who I'm talking to. Okay, we have a product problem solver, a coach, an engineering leader, a data engineer, an enabler, a flow encourager. That's an interesting title, or an interesting role. I like it. Technical team leader. Excellent. So a little bit more about me. So when I got into tech, I was originally a programmer. And, and if you look at that microcomputer, as they were called when I got into tech, in front of me, and you can look at my face and say, that was a while ago. You can look at that microcomputer and say, that was really a while ago. I was a programmer for about 7 years. And during that time, I wrote my third and fourth books, actually, because I was also an author. My third and fourth books were assembly language programming books that I co-authored with David Eyes. That's the manuscript for one of them, which is finally done, and I was resting before I packaged it up to send it off to our publisher. So that tells you how long ago that was. That was a while ago, but I was a programmer for 7 years. I really liked it. I was beginning to get curious about managing, and Apple Computer made me an offer to come manage. In fact, to manage not programmers, but product managers. Apple asked me to come create a product management group for development tools and to create the group, to hire the product managers who would be part of my group. And I did that for a couple of years, at which point I realized I wasn't getting enough nerd satisfaction. And I wanted to go back to managing programmers. And so I spent 7 years at Apple. The remaining 5 years I spent managing programmers, and the last 3 years managing the UX of the Macintosh Finder. I went on from there to become a director of engineering and then a VP of engineering at all of these companies in sort of that circular pattern. So there's a whole bunch of companies there. Some of them were very, very small, and some of them were very, very big, like Apple or Schwab or Stanford University. And I had all of those roles. And I should say, I first encountered Agile for the first time in 1999, and then was leading Agile teams for the next decade. In 2009, I began training other people's teams in Agile, and then about that time looked backward and said, most of my career has been about untangling the knots in development of product teams. I want to consult and do that more fully. And so I began consulting with a whole bunch of companies. At this point, I've delivered almost 200 Agile trainings to almost 200 teams around the world, in addition to parachuting in as an interim VP of engineering and advising business and engineering leaders, coaching engineering leaders. So now, having done that little bit of introduction, I want to talk about self-organizing teams. So we're going to do another chat storm, and this chat storm, and okay, so why are we talking about self-organizing teams? Agile, in the Agile Manifesto, talks about self-organizing teams. It says our best teams are going to be self-organizing teams. So what characterizes self-organizing teams? So again, type into chat a word or a phrase that describes what's essential about self-organizing teams, and don't press, unlike Gopal, don't press enter until I give you the signal.
I'm a fast learner. I didn't type enter.
Ooh, fast learner, yes. Good job, Gopal.
I'm patting myself in the back for this.
Okay, so as you finish your thought, press enter. Yeah, we're getting some interesting answers here. Cross-functional, I like that. Trust and camaraderie are good ones. Involvement from everyone and every and probably throughout the organization. Open communication. The team decides how they work. Their self-organizing teams have autonomy and are empowered. The ability to make decisions by the team, and an interest in putting the team above self. Boy, I like that a lot, Doug. Okay, so those are all really good. I want to share with you a couple of thoughts of mine about self-organizing teams. One, every team member is a leader. So if we've got a self-organizing team, I believe that even the intern is a leader. So only one leader at a time, but leadership passes transparently among all the members of the team. And in fact, every member of the team probably has something to contribute, even the intern, or we hired the wrong intern. Because what we're looking for in an intern is to bring us the latest thinking from what they're learning. So every team member is a leader. Every team member steps up at the appropriate time. So when when that team member says, I think I've got something to contribute here, they feel free to step up and share that. And that includes the intern. And so that's really important. So the key to the appropriate time is that every team member listens. And so this goes to some of the things you said, like open communication and trust and uh, co-empowerment. And the key to stepping up is that every contribution is honored by the team. So if our self-organizing team are an acting troupe, what kind of acting do we do? So let's go back to here. Every team member is a leader. The leadership passes transparently back and forth among all the members of the team. Every team member steps up at the appropriate time. Everyone listens, and every contribution is honored by the team. So if that's our self-organizing team and we're an acting troupe, what kind of acting do we do? You can type that into chat, or you can unmute and share. Improv. Thank you, Doug. Have any of you done improv? No? I just observed. For my birthday a few years ago, I gave myself an improv class, Saturday improv class for my birthday, gifted to myself. It was a wonderful experience. Now, if our self-organizing team were a music combo, what kind of music might we be performing? An orchestra. An orchestra has a director who is pointing to who to do what. Jazz. Yes. Jazz, probably, because in jazz, what we often see is that every member of a jazz group solos, and that soloing is not necessarily known ahead of time. The members of the jazz group are listening to each other, and they feel when to come in. And even the person who's leading must continue listening, because someone else may feel it and begin to lead it in a further direction. Anybody know what the rule of thumb for improv is? It's 2 words. I'll give you a clue. It turns out that thank you, Tony. Yes, and it turns out that everyone I've ever met who took an improv class knows that that's the rule of thumb. Yes, and because we're saying yes to what the team is already doing, and then we're anding that. We're helping move that forward, but it may be off in this direction or that direction, or a place that we can contribute a direction. So who's the leader of a jazz group? Who's the leader of an improv group? Everyone. The leadership passes back and forth on those teams, those groups, those combos, whatever we want to call them. So software development. So in my 5th book, we collected rules of thumb and nuggets of wisdom. And there are 300 of them in the center section of managing the unmanageable. But my core rule of thumb is that software development is a team sport. And if software development is a team sport, team sports are gated by communication and collaboration. And that means that anyone's voice at any time can be mission critical, particularly if we're a self-organizing team. So best teams, always, when I do those chat storms, best teams, I said this before, respect and trust, those 2 words always come up. At least one of them always comes up. Almost always, both of them come up, because they're so core to best teams. So in self-organizing teams, I said this before, every member is a leader, every member steps up, the appropriate time is gated by listening, and every contribution is honored by the team. And that means that self-organizing teams and best teams are, I believe, one and the same. And Agile's true purpose is about recreating best teams. Think about that. All right, so I want to shift gears for a minute. Many of you have heard of the Aristotle study. The Aristotle study came out about a decade ago. Yeah, about a decade ago. In fact, 9 years ago. Google undertook the Aristotle study in 2016. And up until that time, I had never heard these two words, psychological safety, in the context of software development. But what Google was doing was Google, just like the rest of us, has teams that are high performance and teams that are low performance and teams that perform in between. And they, unlike the rest of us, Google has a ton of money. And they thought, okay, so we'll spend a little bit of money. We'll ramp up a team to figure out what constitutes our highest performance teams. And they went into it thinking it would be the makeup of the team. Who was on that team? 10x the supposed 10x developers, or maybe it's some diversity or lack of diversity, or who knew. But they thought it had to do with the membership of the team, and they found out that had nothing to do with it. They had every different kind of team makeup in their highest performance teams. But what was common was psychological safety on those teams. And the interest of one of the really, truly interesting things that they discovered was that you could see it. If you watch those teams work, what you would discover was equality and conversational turn-taking. That's their words. Equality and conversational turn-taking, which is to say, no one dominated the conversation of that team and no one was silent. There was about each person contributed about an equal amount of time in the conversation as the team. Now, the characteristic of psychological safety is that anyone's voice at any time could be mission critical. And Amy Edmondson is the guru of psychological safety. She's a professor at Harvard. Wrote a book called Teaming, the Fearless Organization. Books called Teaming and the Fearless Organization, and others. And she said psychological safety is a shared belief held by members of a team that the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. Gopal, you have a question.
Do you want me to ask the question now or wait until the end?
If it's applicable to now, ask it now.
Okay. Yeah, you were talking about the voice, self-organizing team. Everybody should have a voice and they should speak equal time and everybody else should listen with respect, all those things, right?
Yep.
I don't disagree with any of that, but I'm just thinking about it practically. Usually the teams I've been in, there's always this one individual, and this is not like one person I'm thinking of, this is like there's this one person who would like to dominate the conversations or take over the time.
Are we identifying a core role for managers?
No, this is not
actually, Gopal, I think we are.
Okay.
That's actually not a question.
Okay.
We are identifying a role for managers. Helping dominant individuals recognize the importance of equality and conversational turn-taking.
What if the manager is not there in those conversations?
Probably the team's telling them about it. The manager's going to be having one-on-ones with all the people who report to them.
That's a good point.
Now there is one challenge I can speak to that managers can have that I've experienced, which is the assumption by all the members of the team that their manager just knows stuff.
Yeah.
that they don't have to share. So one of the aspects of communication is making sure that we all communicate everything that's important. All right, so let me move on, and we can come back to this some more if it seems relevant after we've covered a little bit more territory. How's that?
No, you
So-
answered my question.
Sorry, Gopal?
You answered my question.
Okay, great.
No additional details needed. Yeah, thank you.
Great. So here are those words that came up in the from the Aristotle study folks, the Aristotle group, who said you can see it: quality and distribution of conversational turn taking. So enlightened managers, their team focus is on empowering and encouraging self-organizing teams. And that means just what we talked about, or just what Gopal and I were talking about, is one of the aspects of empowering and encouraging self-organizing teams. It's empowering and encouraging trust and respect and psychological safety. The problem is that too few managers know that. Now, what you're looking at in the picture is a typical drawing in training. The trainer comes in to train a team in Scrum, and this is a Scrum drawing, but the other Agile drawings aren't that different. And you've got a Scrum, in this case, you've got a Scrum Master and a product owner and a bunch of people on the Scrum team who are doers, and you've got a business owner and stakeholders. And there's no manager there. Managers don't actually get that training of what's their role, which is part of the reason for my giving this talk tonight. So another chat storm. I want you to think about the best manager in your career, the best manager you've ever had. Think about the best manager you've ever had and type into chat a word or phrase that characterizes what made her or him the best manager, and wait to press enter. A word or phrase. No long expositions. Purnima's little finger slipped on the enter key. All right, so as you finish your thought, Purnima's already finished hers. As you finish your thought, press return. All right, so encouraging, empowering team members, treating everyone inclusively, values any and probably all contributions. They're humble. I like that. They actively listen. They manage relationships. Active listening comes up twice. Jovial. I am fun operated, not coin operated. I like that. And they listened. I like all those. So Google did another study that you probably haven't heard of. Actually, they did two of them. The first one was in 2002. They ran an uncontrolled experiment. It wasn't a study. They ran an uncontrolled experiment by simply getting rid of all their managers. They didn't believe that managers were contributing. It didn't go well. So they brought managers back, but they weren't convinced. So in 2008, they created the study I was referring to, Project Oxygen. Project Oxygen was actually a confirmation, it was intended to be a confirmational study, confirmed for us that managers don't matter. They hadn't learned their lesson in 2002. Confirmed for us that managers don't matter. And what they discovered was pretty much the opposite, that managers mattered a lot. So a little bit from that study. So they said what employees valued the most, this is from the Project Oxygen study, were even-keeled bosses who made time for one-on-one meetings, who helped people puzzle through problems by asking questions, not dictating answers, and who took an interest in employees' lives and careers. And it turns out that there was a linear relationship between manager quality and worker happiness, which was linear, which as no surprise, worker happiness is linearly related to retention. So a little bit more introduction to me. So I wrote Managing the Unmanageable with Mickey Mantle, not the ball player. Thank you, Rod. And we started writing this in 2004. The first edition was released in 2012. And when we started in 2004, both of us were convinced Agilists. But even 8 years later in 2012, as we were finishing the writing of the first edition, Agile had not reached critical mass. There was still a ton of software development organizations that were fully waterfall, were in no way claimed Agile. And so when we wrote it, all the way through the first edition, we said, well, if you're using traditional methods like waterfall or RUP or spiral but one of the traditional methods, here's what you do as a manager. And if you've embraced Agile, here's what you do differently as a manager. And we thought we had covered the gamut of stuff, only to discover that when the book came out in 2012, that the number one question we got was, my team went Agile, what's my role? Even though we had walked through that. So we had failed at one of the aspects that we were looking at, and we had the opportunity then in 2020 to do a second edition. And so you're looking at the cover of the second edition. Now, one of the, I mentioned that the center section, that's been called the creamy center section of the book. The center section is 300 rules of thumb and nuggets of wisdom. And I told you that my core rule of thumb is that software development is a team sport. But but we've got a few from Agilists in there, and early Agilists. Mike Cohn, in Succeeding with Agile, which came out, I think, in 2001, said a common misconception is that because of this reliance on self-organizing teams, there's little or no role for leaders of Agile teams. Nothing could be further from the truth. And Esther Derby, who is co-founder of the Scrum Alliance, and Diana Larson, who is co-creator of the Agile Fluency Project, both have called out the importance of managers in Agile organizations, but different roles for managers. So management roles fundamentally change in Agile. Agile done well represents a shift from managers in charge to teams in charge. But actually, Agile expects everyone to be a leader. So we were talking about that earlier, even the intern as a leader. So how many of you have Agile managers? So type nope, maybe, sort of, or absolutely into chat if you're comfortable doing so, and press return.
What exactly do you mean by the question?
You decide. I will help fill in. I'm going to help fill in what I hope is the answer to that. But based on what we've talked about so far, based on your belief in what an Agile manager is, go for it. Okay, so we've got one nope, one maybe, sorta. It's encouraging. Got any other answers here?
Do we need to tell whether we have come across any managers that they are agile?
Answer it how you'd like. How's that, Purnima?
Okay.
Another maybe, sorta. Oh, several maybe, sortas. Ooh, and absolutely. Always good to have an absolutely. I'm sorry that, but it's typical that we also always have a nope. So this is the 10th chapter. To the second edition, we added 40 more pages on this topic. If you're agile, what do managers do? Because managers, we didn't realize when we wrote the first edition the extent to which managers were confused about what their role was. And so there are familiar management roles that teams still need. There are roles and styles that are truly inappropriate, and so we want to deprecate those. There are roles that change, sometimes dramatically, and there are roles that are new with Agile. One of the things we did in the book was to create an exercise. So we listed there's 50 plus roles there, organized into 5 different categories of roles, 50 different roles. And if you notice the grid on the left, the exercise was identify whether this role should, as you move from a traditional project management system, team system, to an agile one, does this change not at all, or does it change a lot? And we rank them. We think that it's going to differ some, but we rank them, and you can see there's 8 or 10 there on the left. In the 0 column, doesn't change at all. There's probably the same number in the boy does that change a lot, and a bunch of them in between. And what I want to talk about now is a few of the ones that change a lot and that don't change hardly at all, starting with creating an agile culture. So agile culture and management theories, you're probably thinking, where's he going? So I'm not talking about in management theories about Taylorism. For those of you who don't know, Taylor was the guy who was the I think he was describing how to load railroad cars, and he had a stopwatch, and he was trying to get people to load railroad cars in the least amount of time possible. And Taylorism is in my mind, and I think probably all Agilist minds, not appropriate for software development, and certainly not aligned in any way with Agile. What we are talking about with Agile culture and management theories, are 3 theorists who came along in the 1950s. Abraham Maslow, you probably all know his hierarchy of needs. Frederick Hertzberg and Douglas McGregor, and I'll talk about Hertzberg in a minute. But Douglas McGregor, well, first let me note that we talked about all 3 of them. We gave them each a couple of pages in our chapter on motivating programmers, and I'll tell you why we looked at McGregor. McGregor was the guy who, in the 1950s, and maybe a little bit before that, came up with Theory X, Theory Y management. Theory X being basically Taylorism. Management is authoritarian. You can see it's an X. It's Theory X. So there's an X there. Management's pushing down on the staff. Management is authoritarian. It's repressive. It has tight control. It has a depressed culture. Whereas Theory Y, the managers are uplifting their staff. Their job is to support the staff. And notice that the words in that box for Theory Y include the words enabling and empowering and developmental and continuous improvement. Anybody recognize those words? Those are all words we use to describe servant leadership in Agile. In fact, it took us in software development, which had started in the 1950s, it took us until the 1990s and 2000s to begin to embrace Theory Y management, to begin to embrace enabling and empowering and developmental and continuous improvement. It took getting to Agile to get there. So Alan Shalloway, here's a nugget of wisdom. said, Lean Agile management is the art of leading people, not managing them, of creating the correct environment, of focusing them on the right things and trusting them to do their work. In leading Agile, the manager has two primary responsibilities: setting the outcomes or goals expected of the team and assisting the doers in creating a better process to get their jobs done. I led a workshop at Agile Open California in 2013, and one of the participants, and I did not capture a name, and I apologize if it was any one of you. One of the participants said, "Management sets the boundaries of what needs to be done and says to the team, I trust you to figure out how to get it done." Memorable. And here's another rule of thumb. Anybody know who said trust but verify? Reagan. Thank you, Gopal. Anybody know who Reagan was quoting? This is a tougher one. Reagan was quoting Vladimir Lenin. This is not widely known. In fact, trust but verify is actually, while Lenin said it, it's actually a Russian proverb. Trust but verify, a Russian rule of thumb. What I like about it is that it embodies the imperative not to micromanage. It states the essence of delegation, and it talks about basically setting expected outcomes for teams and then verifying. So let me shift gears for a minute and talk about programming as a team sport, my core rule of thumb.
Hey,
So, yes.
Ron, there is a question on the chat.
Oh, any thoughts on why it took software development so long to adopt theory? Why it may be that so theory to practice. I don't know that it took software development longer than anywhere else, any other parts of industry, any other parts of commerce, any other parts of business. I don't know that. I just know that it took a heck of a long time. So I don't know the answer to that. So I've got to.
I have
go
a
ahead.
thought on that. I think it's more a behavioral issue from a management perspective. Managers are
Okay.
used to do the power, so it's a change, big behavioral change that is not easy, and it has to be a generational shift. That's why.
Yeah, I'll buy that. I think that's it. My own role models for managers. So I think management spans the a spectrum from micromanagement on one end to throwing the people who report to you into the deep end and seeing whether they sink or swim, and a whole gamut in between. But I never had the gamut in between, and I think that's true for a heck of a lot of us. That either, and my dad was a micromanager, and I swore I would not be like him, and then saw my first boss in journalism and my first boss in programming both were throw you in the deep end and see whether you sink or swim. And I thought, okay, so that's the choice. I'll go with the sink or swim choice. And in between there is delegation and support. And I think we're missing. So to your point, Gopal, I think we're missing role models. So I want to do this poll, and the poll asks, in your organization, are teams truly teams, or are they a bunch of folks who report to the same stand-up? Okay, I've got 3 answers so far. Going once, going twice. All right, the answers from the 3 of you. Not sure why no one else is answering, but the answers from the 3 of you is there are more bunches of folks who report to the same stand-up than truly teams. Sorry to hear that. So if programming is a team sport, I said this before, teams are gated on communication and collaboration. And managers need to create a culture of communication at every level with everyone, up, down, within, and across. And I think that's really difficult. So I'll share another rule of thumb. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth. We should use them in that ratio. And that applies, Gopal, that applies to your dominant speaker. It applies to those of us who are managers. It applies to everyone. And maybe if we've got 7 people on our team, we need to have 6 ears for the other 6 people and 1 mouth. I'm not sure that doesn't exactly work out with the way our heads are designed, but we need to create a culture of listening and hearing and empathizing. In order to have trust and respect, we need a culture of listening and hearing and empathizing. And this is a rule of thumb that I contributed. Mostly Mickey and I did not contribute to the rules of thumb in the center section of our book. Mostly they're from other people, but I contributed this one because most of us in programming are introverts. So while I think that maybe salespeople can over communicate, I think mostly in programming we cannot over communicate. We do not communicate enough. And I use the word communicate in that sense of having 2 ears and 1 mouth and using them in that ratio, really having a culture of listening and hearing and empathizing in addition to sharing. And then when we've got virtual teams and remote teams, which due to the pandemic, almost all of us have these days, we can pretty much agree that there's never enough communication, and we have to really truly commit to communicate. Ted Young said long before the pandemic happened, the more distance between teammates, the more you have to formalize communication and make it explicit. So we've got a whole chapter on establishing successful programming cultures. And my belief is that a successful programming culture and a successful agile culture are one and the same. So I'm going to move on to a second manager role, which is supporting agile values. So how do we do that? Are we talking about agile practices? So I've been engaged in discussion groups on LinkedIn and earlier on other places on agile for a long time. And probably a decade ago, there was a huge amount of conversation going on, of which people who were contributors to those discussion groups said, practices are meaningless unless we've got agile mindsets to start with. And it really made me think about it because that wasn't my experience. And so I listed a bunch of agile practices. And I think you could probably list a bunch of agile practices that are an equal or even more. And you walk down that list and you say, every one of those has value. Agile practices actually do deliver value. In fact, probably 15 years ago, I was engaged with a group that went to Agile and went back to Waterfall, but kept having daily stand-ups. Daily stand-ups, planning daily, not just status updates, but planning daily, actually has a tremendous amount of value. In fact, one more introductory note here. I'm the co-author of the study of product team performance. We did something like 7 studies over a decade. And each of them, we asked thousands of people on product teams all over the world, characterize your team. Is it high performance or low performance or something in between? And then we asked about some practices, and we had a data science member of our team who then looked at, is there any correlation between the practices and the performance of teams? And we found in stand-ups that stand-ups matter, that in fact, effective daily stand-ups correlate directly, linearly with performance. And we found that definitions of done matter. And in fact, definitions of done that are created by the team itself matter most, as opposed to definitions of done that are created by a manager, a product manager, or an executive, or are handed into the team. When the team itself has a conversation about what it means to be done with every single story, what the engineering criteria are to be done, it correlates with the highest performance teams. Agile practices do deliver value. But let me tangent for a second. Voting machines deliver value too. Now we're looking at a voting machine from the 1950s, I think. I think that's what my mother used to vote in when she went to my high school to pull levers. But regardless of what the voting machine looks like, nobody claims that voting machines are what make us a democracy. Democracy emanates from values and principles. Agile practices don't by themselves make us agile. Agile practices only deliver better teams. They don't deliver great teams. Agile values and agile principles make us agile. And what are those? The agile values are, the Agile Manifesto gave us a set of values back in 2001, when all the various agilists came together and came up with the word agile as the umbrella term for XP and Scrum and Kanban and a bunch of other things. And they came up with 12 principles. And the only one, so the question comes up, well, are they still applicable today? Well, the only one I disagree with is this one. Our highest priority is to satisfy the customer. I think that's wrong. I think our highest priority is to delight the customer. Agile values and agile principles. And think about best teams and the correlation between agile values and agile principles and the best teams you've been on. I think we're looking at great teams. So moving on to empowering self-organization and excellence, a role of managers. And Gopal and I were talking about that in terms of that dominant voice and finding ways to, improv and jazz don't give us manager models because everybody in a jazz group and everybody in an improv group is a leader. And so I thought about that for a while and thought, well, there's this interesting correlation with sports coaching, and specifically basketball. So when I was at Charles Schwab, and I mentioned, so I was at Schwab from 96 to 2002. And in 1999, I was still a director of engineering, wanting to be a VP of engineering, and I had a manager, a management coach. And she put a book in my hands, a book by a guy named Phil Jackson. Some of you who follow basketball may know who Phil Jackson is. Phil Jackson, the book was a book named Sacred Hoops. And he's subsequently written another one. Phil Jackson in Sacred Hoops is telling the story of how he inherited a team, the Chicago Bulls, that included the only player in basketball whose name I knew. So you are looking at a total basketball nerd here, or un-nerd, I'm not sure which way it goes. But I was not a follower of basketball in 1999, whenever she handed me this book. And the story is about how Phil Jackson moved from having the best basketball player, Michael Jordan, and a losing team creating teamwork of a group of players who worked with each other, who played with each other, who crafted winning basketball teams. Now, it turns out that when you win basketball championships, I've learned, they give you jewelry. They give you rings. And Phil Jackson's most recent book, I believe, unless he's got one since this, was called 11 Rings. And it's about the number of NBA championship rings the guy has. He won 1 or 2 of them as a player, 3 of them, I believe, with the Chicago Bulls, and the rest with the LA Lakers. And it's about creating teams. I still wasn't interested in basketball until living in San Francisco, the Golden State Warriors suddenly were winning basketball. And it was pretty amazing because the best player in basketball was not on, in my opinion, was not on the Golden State Warriors team. And in fact, a lot of commentators' opinions, the best player was one of the players they were playing against, but they won championships against that player. Anybody name who it is? I can't remember.
LeBron.
LeBron James. Thank you. Amazing basketball player. But the Golden State Warriors were winning, and it took until about the 3rd time. So I only watched the championships. I still wasn't really into basketball, but I thought, wow, those guys that's amazing teamwork I'm looking at there. And it occurred to me about the 3rd time they won a championship, gee, maybe their coach, Steve Kerr, played basketball. It's real duh for a non-sports guy. I looked him up on Wikipedia. Steve Kerr played on Phil Jackson's team. He played on the Chicago Bulls. He learned coaching from Phil Jackson. So are there projects not suitable for Agile? So when I began training teams in Agile in 2009, for the next few years, every once in a while, I get this question. And usually it was because the team that I was teaching Agile to thought that their project was not suitable for Agile. And in all cases, I was scratching my head trying to figure out, maybe an embedded microcontroller software project might not be suitable. But then, if you talk to Rich Sheridan, who wrote Joy Inc., they do that kind of thing in an Agile way. So that clearly wasn't the answer. And it finally dawned on me after about 3 years that I was answering the wrong question. Because I think all projects are suitable, but not all cultures are suitable for Agile. Micromanagement cultures are not suitable for Agile. Agile calls for everyone on the team to step up. Micromanagement causes everyone to step back. It causes doers to put their hands in their pockets and say, tell me what to do next. Not to be leaders, not to step up, not to listen to each other, to only listen to the boss. Micromanagement disrupts Agile. It prevents best teams. It prevents learning. It makes teams become order takers. I said I would bring back Frederick Hertzberg, the 3rd of those Maslow, McGregor, and Hertzberg. Hertzberg was the guy who said there are not just motivators. Motivation is not just about motivating, it's also about removing demotivators, foundational factors. And if you look at, I forget who brought up fun, but if you look at the 5th set of bars there, so the blue bars are motivators, what motivates programmers. The red bars are what demotivates programmers. And not having fun, and you have to put the word not in front of all those things for the demotivators. Having fun and not having fun are about equal. Boy, you gotta have fun going on in your organization. But if you look at, I think one of the more interesting ones here is about 5th from the right, there's ethical management. not much of a motivator, but a huge demotivator. So I've never met anybody who said, "Oh yeah, I went to this company because they had ethical management." Or look at the third or fourth one from the right. I went to this company because of its company policies and administration. I bet you that you all know somebody who left a company for unethical management or for bad company policies and bad administration. So one of managers' roles is to defang the bad stuff and to so that, because motivation doesn't happen, making a difference in the world, learning and growing toys and technology and having fun, motivation doesn't happen without the demotivators being dealt with. So I'm going to move on from that to I'm not going to talk about scaling Scrum, and I'm going to talk only very briefly about the next three. Scaling organizations is a management challenge that arguably doesn't change a lot, but in fact it changes a ton with Agile. But I'm not going to talk about it because I don't have a group of managers here, and I'm not going to bore the rest of you. But I will talk about removing impediments. So in Scrum, all of you who've ever run across Scrum, who removes impediments?
Removes
Everyone.
or make sure that they're, visualized to be removed.
Maybe both. Thank you, Melissa. The Scrum Master is what it was what I was going after. But who does the Scrum Master go to when they can't solve the problem? It's managers. Escalation goes to managers because managers are more connected into the organization, generally speaking, than anybody else on a team.
I guess I'd argue it really kind of depends because often it's going to be a product manager or an engineering manager. But I've found a lot of times when somebody brings something up on a retrospective that's problematic, and then we talk about what the action item can be for that, a lot of times then they say something like, well, this team needs to do this. And they say, okay, do you want me to facilitate that conversation or do you want to talk to that person yourself? And at least half the time they say, oh, I'll go reach out to that person or something, And so it may depend on the individuals, may depend on the team.
Yeah, I'm really referring to things that require escalating up, that managers get escalated to. So a management role is removing impediments. It's not that every impediment gets escalated to managers,
Mhm.
but it is a role of managers. In
Yes.
fact, Diana Larson basically calls it out in this quote that managers are not needed for planning and controlling, but for the important job of interfacing on the team's behalf with the rest of the organization. And removing impediments is one of those things. I want to talk about two impediments that are sort of implicit in management roles that teams may not escalate, but that managers need to take care of. And one of them is ensuring the teams have slack. And I like this picture because if you look at the street on the left, that there's a ton of slack there, and those cars are going to move really easily down that street. Whereas the team on the right, the street on the right, has no slack. It's basically come to a standstill. 100% capacity basically begets bottlenecks, and manager responsibility to make sure that teams have slack is an implicit responsibility. And a second one is protecting team focus. And teams may escalate, in fact, to say, "Hey, we're being distracted, we're being pulled off to do other things." They may be escalating those things, but managers need to be on the lookout for both of these things implicitly. Coaching counseling and mentoring. When I showed you that list of 54 roles, counseling, coaching, and mentoring was one of the 54. And I thought, and so I've run that experiment with groups of managers to say, do you think that changes a little or a lot? And my take would have been it wouldn't have changed at all. That's always been a role for managers to counsel and coach and mentor. The interesting thing was that a number of managers came back and said, given that I was running projects, I never had time to counsel and coach and mentor. Agile finally allowed me to do my job. And I thought that was really an interesting observation. So I've got I think probably these two girls are actually pair programming, but I like the picture so much I throw it in here because one of them could be coaching or mentoring or counseling the other. And I think it's a very important role for managers and always has, and in my opinion, always should have been. Spotify, which some of you may have been pointed to Spotify's Agile practice at some point in the past because they've been written up more times than probably any other organization. Spotify, talking about its Agile practice, said its Spotify managers are focused on coaching, mentorship, and solving impediments rather than telling people what to do. And finally, hiring and firing. Mickey and I, when our book first came out in 2012, there actually is in the Bay Area, or was in 2012 in the Bay Area, a cable TV show devoted to software development, half-hour show devoted to software development, and we got invited on. And the host of that show, so Mickey and I are starting, we're sitting down, he's introduced us, and his first question was, okay, so you've got 300 rules of thumb in the middle of the book. What's the most important one? I never thought about it really. I'm not sure Mickey had, but both of us blurted out, always be recruiting. It is a role that the folks who report to us seldom see, but count on us to get good people to join their teams. And the make work part of recruiting involves a ton of networking, a ton of extroversion for most of us who are still introverts. It requires a ton of meeting up at meetups and of going to conferences and meeting possible engineers and getting to know people and keeping track of people we really wished we could hire, but we couldn't at the time. And maybe we can now. There's just the hiring window may be closed, but if it flips open, we need to be ready to hire. There's just so much to be said about always be recruiting that teams do not want to take on. No programmer. No, there are very few people on teams who want to always be recruiting. And they always also want us to deal with problem employees. And Gopal's your example of the employee who talks all the time. Far from the worst example of a problem employee, but teams expect us to know the issues and as their manager to deal with them. So I want to summarize in 2 slides. Leadership roles for an agile world, trusting people, empowering self-organization and excellence, expecting and nurturing truly shared leadership, modeling and defending and evangelizing agile values with the rest of the organization, internally to the teams and externally to the rest of the organization, fostering that culture of communication that probably is still not enough, but we need more, encouraging teamwork and collaboration, shielding teams from politics and distraction, and taking care of stuff, taking care of teams. So critical managers, I believe, are critical to Agile success, as did those early Agilists, Mike Cohn and Diana, and they called them out. They have key roles to play in Agile. They have key roles in Agile transformations. They have key roles in creating Agile culture. They are key to removing impediments. But Agile demands that managers, like everyone else, understand and adapt. And that starts by managers understanding their new and changed roles, and managers adapting to and owning those roles. So I'm going to leave this slide up for a minute, take a screenshot of it. Should you want a copy of the book, take the 35% discount code at informatit.com/Lichty. You can go to there to find the book at our publisher's site. You can get 35% off, which I've never seen Amazon cheaper than that. And sometimes it's considerably less than Amazon. Or if you want the video training, 50% off. Take a screenshot and I will share my contact information in a minute. But in the meantime, questions. What questions did I not answer? Gopal, did you spot any others in the chat that I should be answering?
I did not. And since we have a small team, please come off mute and ask the questions to Ron.
Yes, please.
Why don't I kick this off, Ron? So, this is a great conversation. I mean, obviously, these are nuggets of wisdom. Thank you, Ron. So I want to ask you a question. So let's start with a generic question. If I were to ask you, describe your leadership style, what would you say? And this is a two-part question. And the second part is, has this leadership style evolved over the years you have been a leader?
Let me start with that. So I shared that my role models were either micromanagement, my dad, or throw them in the deep end and see them sink or swim. And when I went to Apple, that was my first management role. Among the first, I had product management teams of 2 or 3 product managers. That changed. I had 6 months teams. But the very first one, I walked into Apple and my manager said, "You're new at management. We have Apple University for managers, for people at Apple, but they're mostly manager classes. You are going to take one called Managers in the Law." I went off and took Managers in the Law. At the time, it was a half day. I'm sure it's at least a day by now. But I took that, and half a day later, I came back and said, "Whoa, there's a lot about management and the law that I did not know. I'm really glad I took that class. I need to look at the rest of the classes because I bet there's a bunch more that I don't know." And I selected, and I don't know whether I got advice to do this or whether I just selected it, but I selected a class called Situational Leadership. And situational leadership is still taught. It comes out of a company in Marin that came up with the concept and typical of HR kinds of thinking, which management, how to leadership. It's got quadrants, 4 quadrants. Quadrants are 4, and it has to do with, is the person you're managing new to the workforce, and is the person you're managing new to the work they're doing? So you might have somebody who's a totally expert, but they're new to the work they're doing. And I never thought about either one of those, Gopal. And so my first group, actually, my boss had hired my first employee before I arrived. He was coming out of college. he joined my group. So I was one and the only person in my group for about 2 weeks, and then he showed up, and then I managed to hire another and hire a third into that group. But that first one, straight out of college, and I was throwing him in the deep end to see whether he could sink or swim. And I'm sitting in that class thinking, oh my God. And I went back and I said, Tom, I'm sorry. I it was the only reasonable approach to managing that I knew, but I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to delegate and support. And he breathed the biggest sigh of relief of all. I can't tell you the look of relief on his face. So did I change? Yeah, I did. And to that sort of middle ground of between those two, of delegation and support, of that theory Y management. And then over the course of a few decades, from project management to Agile to team, and from me in charge to team in charge. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Other questions? Anybody else want to throw one in? Let me take this down so we can see each other.
There's also Theory Z, which I just posted a description of in the chat.
Ooh. I think unlike Theory Y, which did not embrace anything of Theory X, I think Theory Z probably embraces all of Theory Y plus.
Yeah,
That sound right, Rob?
you could say that. It's beyond.
It
Like
extends,
I think it's more the Kaizen too.
extends
Like
Theory Y.
quality Kaizen.
Yeah. Neat.
I see a lot of quality stuff in that. Consensus-based decision. Yeah.
Yeah. Theory X and Theory Y are really,
It's really more team. If you look at the words too, it's more team oriented, which is the Japanese. Which is funny because the Americans taught the Japanese about their management techniques that they made better. Pretty funny.
yeah,
Operations.
remarkable. Questions? Gopal, you said you asked the first of your questions earlier. Did you have a
That was a
follow-up
two-part
one?
question.
Oh,
That
okay.
was the two-part question I had. Yeah.
Okay, if we don't have more questions, yeah, I'll go for Deming too, Doug. If we don't have more questions, I think we could probably wrap up.
I may be biased, but I found this really a great presentation, Ron. Though I've known you, it's just great to kind of go over this material. It's so pertinent.
Thanks, Rob.
I have a presentation to a potential client next week. I'm gonna be using some of it. I was doing some screenshots.
Great.
Well, thanks everybody. This is awesome. First of all, thank you, Ron. This is amazing. Learned a lot. Thank you for doing this. And as Rob said, right, this transcends what you're talking about, transcends generations and time. So thank you.
Did we want to tease our next topic?
Yeah, I was about to throw it to
Great.
you.
Good idea.
Yeah,
Thanks, Ron.
please.
Woohoo, Ron. Don't leave yet. Wait for the teaser.
Yeah,
Are you gonna talk about Gopal?
please go ahead.
No, I don't
I was
have it
about to
up.
throw it to you about
I don't have it up.
Yeah, please go ahead.
No, I don't
Rob-
have it up.
Rob does not have it up. I don't have
Okay, so let's so we have a awesome speaker that Rob has invited next time, Gene. He is going to talk about what is the topic? This was about
Sorry, I didn't mean to set you up
so
for failure.
Gene is an industry leader who talks about less. He talks about agility. He talks about product operating model. He talks about product leadership. So he's going to bring together all of these things into
a
a
ton about-
conversation.
I can tell you right now. I can tell you. I pulled it up.
ton
The
about
topic is
values.
called separating noise from signal. What is true agile
Yeah.
enterprise? See, we got it.
Thank you,
That
Rob.
was
So it's
February.
going to span multiple areas functionally in terms of from an enterprise perspective. So this is going to be awesome. That's
February
coming up
5th. We'll be sending out announcements for it.
And Gene's name is
Yeah.
Gene Gendel.
Gendel,
Yeah.
G-E-N-D-L. Yep.
He runs a meetup out in New York that
Yeah.
that I
Yes.
attend a
Oh, you
lot of the
do?
sessions. Oh, he's a great guy, and
Oh, good.
yeah, I've heard him speak multiple times. I'm looking forward to it.
Super. All right.
Thank you, Ron.
See you in February. I think that's
Yes.
I think that's the first week of February that meeting is.
That would
Yeah.
be.
Okay.
Thanks everyone for joining. Good to see you.
Live long and prosper.
Oh, nice. I like that.
Thank you.
Thank you.